into the episode. For those of you watching on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, drop your comments down below, share the video with your friends, anyone that you think might be interested. It all helps with the algorithms. And for those listening on Spotify, Apple, or any of the other podcasting platforms, please follow, give us a 5-star review or any review. That also helps get the podcast out to more people on those audio platforms. To get into that, let's get on to the next part of the special segment, which is going to be around Rodrigo Bentancur's racism ban / fine that he's been given this week. So yeah, more positive news to get through, in ironic air quotes. So yeah, if again you haven't been up to speed on this incident, I think it happened. Did it happen? It happened kind of in pre-season or in the early part of the season this year. Rodrigo Bentancur was speaking to a Uruguayan journalist, and they were discussing, and the topic moved to Son Heung-Min at some point, and the journalist referred to him as the Korean, going very much down the Pep Guardiola lexicon of descriptive words to describe Son. And then Bentancur said, or replied when asked if he could get a shirt signed by Son, or I could get it signed by his cousin. They all look alike, was I think somewhere near the words he used, inferring that all Koreans look the same or look similar. He was charged with an aggravated breach of using racially insensitive and offensive language based on ethnicity and in this case nationality as well. And he's been given a 7-match ban and £100,000 fine by the FA. So to go into a little bit more detail around this, because I've seen a lot of furore in the kind of football content creator world and also the media around this ban and the fine. An aggravated breach by FA law comes in to incur a minimum of a 6-match ban to a maximum of a 12-match ban range. So Rodrigo Bentancur getting a 7-match ban and £100,000 fine is very much on the low scale, and it's been dealt with to try and make an example of Bentancur. And what I heard and listened to the reasoning behind it was not only because of the language he used in that interview, but also his defense, or should I say non-defense, where he said when he was asked that he was apologizing on behalf of the journalist for the journalist's reaction and not necessarily for the language he used, which the FA took into consideration as part of the reasoning why he was going to get a 7-match ban and £100,000 fine. £100,000 fine, sorry, £100 would be decent actually. So let's get into this, John. So a lot of people are saying it's too severe. A lot of rightly kick it out, and a lot of the DEI kind of organizations around sport and football are saying that they're happy with this judgment. What do you make of it?
I don't know what to make of it. Like, I mean, obviously there's a part of me that thinks, it's not severe enough, right? And that's maybe the more visceral reaction, because it is a slur that could theoretically apply to me, and I've heard said about me before. So that's kind of the visceral, personal part. I'll try and get rid of that part, though, and try and talk about it objectively. I think, in general, the Premier League has always had a problem with this kind of behaviour, this kind of language, and in my opinion, they've almost always undercooked it when it came to punishments or even acknowledging it. I felt like for a very long time, for decades on decades, they barely did anything about it. It seemed almost like slap on the wrists, and in a lot of cases, it depended on who it was that did the thing, or said whatever it was, seemed to get away with it depending on what things have happened. We've heard plenty of stories before about Suarez, John Terry, all of these different things that have happened in the past, and in my opinion, were almost never punished fairly. In my opinion, or severely enough. So, from the point of view of, it's nice to see that they're actually starting to take it a bit more seriously. I feel like from what I've seen, this is maybe one of the more severe bans that I've seen in terms of like the amount of games he'll be suspended by, but don't quote me on that. There might be, other ones that I haven't seen or I'm just misremembering that have been more severe. But I do think that it makes a tangible impact on him and on Tottenham, right? In terms of, he's one of their main midfielders. 7 games is, near enough 20% of the season. And that has a tangible impact on them, right? And how well they can play. And from my point of view, that's the key. You need to have a significant impact on the player and the team that employs the player. Because at the end of the day, the player's own behavior, in some cases, he might just deny it and say, I didn't do anything wrong. Until you hit him where it hurts, and in this case, it's his employer or his ability to play, I don't know if he will necessarily accept the fact that he's done something wrong, right? So I think punishment is important. And I know some people will say, oh, it's free speech and, we can't punish free speech and all this other stuff. He's not being put in prison, just to be very clear. I'm not saying that the government should lock him up for what he said, right? But he is employed, right? And he is saying something against I'm gonna be honest, his team's probably biggest money maker, right? Think about how many South Korean fans come to London to watch Tottenham. The amount of South Korean fans that are probably watching every Tottenham game, that are buying shirts. He's probably their biggest earner, right? In terms of Tottenham Football Club, right? So for a player in his own team to say that about him, I do think that should affect his livelihood. I do think that it should affect him, right? And again, he's not being put in prison. So I'm not saying that he should be locked up for what he said. But from my point of view, as I was saying, I do think it is nice to see finally that there is being some punishment handed out for this. So for all the fans that are, the Tottenham fans particularly in most cases are saying, oh, but other players didn't get this, this fine. What about Enzo and blah, 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 and blah. I'm not making the argument that like everyone should get off with it. And I think that Enzo should be punished, fairly as well. I think other players should get punished for what they said too. I'm not saying that he should be the only one. So I understand, if they're going to cry about fairness. But from my point of view, if you look at it, this is the right decision to be made. And everyone did that to me with Rice, right? And Saliba's red card and all this other stuff. They always said to me, oh, forget about what happened in the next game after that, where the exact same thing happened, but it wasn't punished fairly. What you guys did, you deserved it. So let's do it back to you. How do you like it? Yes, Enzo hasn't been, punished fairly. Other people haven't been punished fairly. Pep didn't get punished fairly necessarily for his comments about Huang, right? I don't care. He made a mistake. We're only looking at him. We're only talking about him. 7-match ban, 100K. So I think those are my overall thoughts on it. I think I'd like to see. I don't want stupid language like this to be heard, right? I think if they want to go, if you want to play in the Premier League, you have to be able to adhere to, the standards of the Premier League as a company, the general standards of society in terms of what is considered to be offensive to say. And I don't think you should be shocked if you end up, in trouble for it. So you can't have it both ways, right? You can't take advantage of one of the best and highest paid leagues in the world, but also try and get away with things that you think are okay in your own country, but you just, but are not okay here. You can't have it both ways, right? So I've babbled for a long enough time, but I think that kind of clarifies my thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. It's been an eye-opening couple of days, I have to be honest, around this topic. I've been really encouraged by this ban and the punishment that's been dealt out. I think it's shown the FA mean business, and they not only have been doing performative stuff when they've been, talking about inclusion and all this kind of stuff with the national team, and a lot of the rhetoric that Gareth Southgate's come out with and kind of been praised for being a great ambassador for England. I think it rings true to a lot of the things that we've seen and heard from Southgate and other people at the FA when you see this incident being dealt with the way it has. I think there are a couple of things that are really important to remember when you start doing whataboutery when it comes to this situation and try and compare it and conflate it with other incidents. I've heard the Enzo one being brought up loads. I totally agree with you. I don't think Enzo should get a punishment lighter than this. I think he should be treated in a very similar fashion. The key thing to bear in mind, though, and it's getting into the weeds, but the FA can hand out this punishment because Bentancur was not on international duty, and he was at that point an ambassador for Tottenham Hotspur, who play in the Premier League, and the FA are the football association of the Premier League in the UK. So it falls within their jurisdiction to come up with this punishment. When Enzo was singing the inappropriate song and the racist song that he was singing on that bus after Argentina had won the Copa America, that was a CONMEBOL and Argentinian FA issue for them to handle. There's nothing the FA can do. He'd been released to Argentina to go and play for his national team, and when players are released, they cease being governed by their club team. They are now they're now the problem of their national team and their continental federation to handle. So the fact that CONMEBOL, FIFA, and Argentina are not dealing with Enzo is reflective of how those organizations deal with these matters. And we've seen it when incidents happen in Italy, Spain, or other countries where, black and ethnic minority players have suffered abuse. We see how they treat them. Like, we see how light the punishment is. We see how menial, those incidents are looked at. And so you can't compare them. Even though you can say Enzo should get a similar ban, there is a difference in how they're being managed and how they're being, dealt with, because there are different organizations that are leading and, having to investigate the incidents. So that is the reason why. So when people say, oh, this isn't worse than Enzo, or why doesn't Enzo get it? You have to look at it as a separate situation. The same way, I'll give you an example. We have to look at handball differently in the Premier League, and we have to look at it differently when we play in Europe. How many times have we come on the pod and moaned because we've had a penalty given away for a handball in Europe, when we know in the Premier League that doesn't get given, because they've got different laws, they've got different rules, and they're being refereed different ways. And these incidents are being dealt with with that same separation. So that's the reason why Bentancur's got dealt with in the way he has. That's the reason why Enzo is still being investigated by UEFA and not UEFA, sorry, CONMEBOL and FIFA and Argentinian FA, and they're separate incidents completely. And I will say, when Evra had his situation with Suarez, I'm pretty sure Suarez got an 8-match ban for it, and a hefty fine. I'm pretty sure that John Terry, when he used his racial language to Anton Ferdinand, even though he was found not guilty in the public courts, I'm pretty sure he was given a 6-match ban or something similar. This is standard procedure. And the fact that Bentancur got the 7-match ban and the £100,000 fine should be treated as it being a standard outcome if you use racist language or xenophobic language, even if you're using it in jest, as a joke, even if it's towards your teammate, even if Son accepts your apology. Because it's not only about Son, it's about the whole, like, all of the Korean fans, all of the East and Southeast Asian fans that are watching and supporting the Premier League being offended by it. Some were, some weren't. That's just the simple case. I'll give another example, Johns, because we were talking about it separately. A show that we watch regularly, The Big Six, one of our favorite shows on, content creators. Love all those guys. They do a great job. It's one of the best football shows out there. There was like a segment where, in fact, they were talking about David Coote and German C word and how it was xenophobic and all that kind of stuff, and pretty much reiterated, I think, a lot of what we agree with, Johns. And then later in the episode, there was like a jokey segment where Big Steve was kind of making fun of Tottenham, and then he described the South Korean fans that often go to the training ground as being North Koreans, and then he called Son Heung-Min or whatever, and said his name in kind of a jokey way, but kind of downplaying, I guess, Son and his importance to Tottenham. So I reached out to him, and fair play to him. He apologised and said it was just a joke, and he genuinely didn't know Son's name. And I took the piss out of him and said he should know Son's name because Son's been packing them out for years, and he needs to learn it. But there are ways that people speak and talk about East and Southeast Asians in football, and often people get away with it. Now, I'm not saying Big Steve's racist or anything like that. I've said it to him as well. But I'm saying this kind of language, you mentioned it, Pep with the Korean. I think Hwang got called Jackie Chan or something like that in a preseason game.
Match.
You've got incident. Yeah, you see these incidents happen all the time. Son's the most racially abused player in the Premier League. I saw some stats about it. He gets the most racial abuse after games more than any other player. And yet, these incidents kind of, when it comes to East and Southeast Asians, often get overlooked. I think the last thing to talk about on this incident, Tottenham have appealed the ban. Which, I'm sorry, that's just outrageous, right? Because they are the one entity involved in this that should completely stay impartial and neutral, because it's two of their own players. And they've basically taken a side now by trying to appeal this 7-match ban and £100,000 fine. And almost, they're basically kind of saying it should be allowed in a certain way to speak in that way, and it shouldn't be punished to that severity. So yeah, man, if we did like Donkey of the Day or kind of Donut of the Week or whatever, Tottenham Hotspur would have to get it, because you can't on one hand condemn racist fans that abuse Son regularly and then come out and try and defend Rodrigo Bentancur's racist language against Son. Which one are you? You can't play both sides. So yeah, Tottenham Hotspur. I mean, you stink, mate.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think one of the things that is annoying me about all of this is, like, I've seen also some people talk about, if Son's okay with it or if they've made up, then why does anyone else need to get involved? And I'm just like, you think Son is the only Korean or East Asian, Southeast Asian that has been objected to the same kind of language? You are not. We have to remember that football players are examples to the rest of the world. They're examples to a lot of young, impressionable people. And just because Son is okay with it, good on him, right? Like, I don't think he's okay with it necessarily, but I think obviously as the captain of Tottenham, who wants his player, who knows this guy well, he probably is going to go and say, you know what, fair enough, apologise to me, let's make up and let's keep on going, right? Because he's a good guy. It's clear that Son is a nice guy. He is the captain of Tottenham for a reason, right? But at the same time, we have to remember that there are plenty of fans out there. There are plenty of other people that may be thinking of saying the same kind of thing, that need to understand that there are consequences, right? And we can't have Son speak for the entire East Asian, Southeast Asian community or Korean community, and just because he's a really nice guy, let everything go. So, that might also be another reason why Tottenham come out and appeal it, is because, Son as the captain says, you know what, I want my player back or whatever else, or they feel like if he's accepted the apology, then why do we need a 7-match ban? And that's just me speculating, right? But that may be part of it, because in my opinion, if Son is not okay with it, or if Son goes out and says, you know what, I'm happy with that 7-match ban, or, the 100k fine is deserved, I don't think Tottenham do go and appeal that, right? I don't think Tottenham will go against their captain to go and try and appeal that, because I think they would be putting into trouble their relationship with him. But obviously he's in a position where he's, pressured. So I have a feeling that could be part of the reason why they may be looking into the appeal. And again, that's just all speculation, but just thinking through it in my head logically, that probably is, in my opinion, what the case is. So I think that is part of it, but I think that does not excuse anything. I think that still stinks to the high heavens, and I think they should just let it go, right? They should count their lucky stars that it wasn't more, and they should move on. They got bigger things to focus on. They've just lost to Ipswich. They're stinking it up in the league. They're just about on the first page of the Premier League table. Focus on going and winning the next game. Don't focus on this. Take the punishment that you've deserved and move on, right? And overall, it's been a terrible couple of weeks in terms of the sentiment of news. But I don't think this is the right thing for people to try and hang their hat on and try and use as an example. There are plenty of other things that you can go and complain about where you probably have a good case for it, but this is not one of those.
Yeah. And last thing before we wrap up, we call for more severe bans for incidents of racism and abuse in football. Now we've got one. Let's not question it. Let's not think it's harsh. Let's not try and then start playing devil's advocate because it's not happening to our, identity group or whatever, like put yourself in another group's shoes. Would you say the same thing? When those things happened with Enzo, when things have happened to Lukaku in Italy and Vinicius Jr. in Spain and to Sterling even in England, or whoever, we all in unison say we need to have more severe punishment. We need to see people take it seriously. So the FA have taken it seriously. Let's just understand that even though you may not be offended by that, and even myself, I'm not majorly offended by what Bentancur said, but I understand the importance of treating this very, very carefully and respecting that there were a lot of people that are from our ethnic group that would be offended by that language. And it's not about my personal opinion, like it's not about Son's personal opinion. It's about a wider perspective. And it's the same, I think there was an incident with Garnacho where he got into hot water because he used a gorilla emoji to describe Onana being strong after saving a penalty. And Onana said, I'm not offended by it, so we should just move on. Onana's not the only black person in the world. Just because he wasn't offended by it doesn't mean that we can't treat it seriously. So you need to treat these issues seriously, and Bentancur needs to learn from this, and everyone, I think, needs to take a moment and learn from this, and understand what is acceptable to say, especially going back to even the Coot thing on camera. If you want to make your little jokey jokes between your mates in a WhatsApp group, and that doesn't go out, people are free to speak however they want within the confines of their own space. But when you do things in public, be ready for a public reaction, especially if you're going to say something controversial or potentially offensive. So well done, the FA. We've absolutely slammed the PGMOL in the previous segment, and we often give them some, the FA and the governing body some grief. But I actually think they deserve an applause and a pat on the back for this, because they've dealt with it well, and I think we should all appreciate the direction that we're going in with dealing with these issues.